08060600973. And if you're in teaching still, let me know how it is for you. I would normally work 4 days a week, says Faye, in Sheffield as a teacher, but I've been asked to do it the 5th, as they just can't get hold of supply teachers, or supply teachers have refused to come because of behaviour. But that's another issue in our schools right now. That's interesting, Faye. Graham says, I think Nadim Zahawi needs to understand that our government might be able to limp along without any talent or expertise. Teaching is a different animal. Ouch. 0345 6060973. As promised, let's hear from Alan Smith now, former secondary school teacher based in Reading. Alan, you returned to school as a cover teacher after your retirement. Are you still there? Welcome.
In 300 yards, slide right onto Causeway, A312.
Particular period of teaching ended in the summer, and then I was asked back to the same school earlier this year and worked there for a while until the mask mandate was removed from schools, at which point
take the next right onto Causeway, A312.
And as somebody without a contract, I was able to stop working at that time.
But the masks did it for you.
Continue on A312 for 1 mile.
It's much more complex than that, but basically for schools to be safe, they need to change the environment the children are learning in. And I think Zadawi, unfortunately, is trying to deal with the wrong problem.
What do you mean change the environment?
Basically make the airs safe to breathe. I think it was Professor Susan Mickey in Independence Age last week said, we don't send children into schools to drink poisoned water. Why do we send them in to breathe poisoned air? And that's the issue. Your previous speaker, Dr. Hobson, mentioned the need for good ventilation. And that is an important thing in schools, and there is no attempt by this government to try and sort this out. We've known about this for quite a long time.
How was it being back initially?
Initially it was fine. We were all masked up because that was the rules at the time. Students and staff all followed those rules, were happy in various ways. We felt it was necessary to do. I wear glasses, my glasses fogged up, some of my students' glasses fogged up. We were able to joke about that together as an issue, but none of us sort of felt that we wanted to take a step that actually endangered anybody else, and that's why we all worked together. And why I was quite surprised when the Department for Education then provided instructions that students were to stop wearing masks at that time.
What is it you teach, Alan?
I teach physics.
And how were your students?
What do you mean, how were my students?
How were they? How receptive were they to your teaching?
They were very receptive to my teaching. I've taught in this particular course several times. I've got some links, and some of them will have had older siblings who I taught with or heard taught in the past. So I was a known face, which is an important part of teaching. That's another thing Darwi is ignoring, that good teaching is about relationship with your students. You can't just plug somebody in there and expect them to be able to teach well.
Alan, good to hear from you. Thank you. That's Alan Smith, who was a secondary school teacher, went back, but won't be back. I'd love to hear from you. I mean, it was just interesting, that text from Faye saying that actually behaviour is another big issue in schools right now. These are all things which would affect any prospective teacher's thinking. But if you are in schools now, if you're a teacher, how difficult is it for you? Because I don't imagine England's Education Secretary would be making this call to arms unless there wasn't a big problem. So can you shed some light? You don't have to give your name and location. I'm just interested in understanding how difficult things are keeping education going. How many people are there ready to fill in should a teacher fall by the wayside? What's happening with COVID? What's happening with isolation? And also, what's happening with your own mental well-being?
In a quarter of a mile, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway, A312.
But as we stand on the precipice of this new term and this appeal for former teachers to come forward, clearly things are perhaps even more difficult than we imagined. And we've had many conversations over the course of the pandemic so far, hearing from teachers about all sorts of things: home learning, pressures on students, exams, for heaven's sake. We did that many times. So at the end of this year and looking ahead to next, with Nadim Zahawi full of hope that former teachers will come forward. If you're in the profession now, it'd be great to hear from you as to how things are going. Here's Jane. Welcome, Jane. How are you?
Hi there, I'm fine, thank you very much.
Tell me about you.
So I have been supply teaching up until a couple of years ago. I was a former teacher in a long-term position, but left due to the lack of work-life balance. I mean, I was literally working every night. I was working 3 days a week, but actually it was 5 days a week, and finishing at 11 o'clock on a Friday night as the earliest I ever finished, so I didn't work the weekend. Based on the hourly rate, it was not even minimum wage. So I went into supply teaching, which I absolutely love to teach.
Exit the roundabout onto the parkway.
Due to COVID, I don't want to go back into a classroom.
Continue on the parkway for 1 mile.
Because of COVID, so COVID is going around in that classroom more than in other classrooms where there is little mitigation anyway. I mean, opening a window, not putting the headphones in, not putting the masks. Well, actually they have gone slightly back to the masks at the moment, but it just seems silly asking vulnerable people, retired people, but actually anybody going back into a classroom, including the students, when, as your poor guest a minute ago, Alan said, just you wouldn't get children to drink poison water, so why are you getting them to drink it to breathe the air that's full of COVID? And as a supply teacher, where would you go in there? And particularly, they're doing it again through supply teaching agencies that take a cut of your wages. So when I first started teaching over 20 years ago, it was done very much through the local authority, and you got what you should get, so 195th of the teacher's wage. So whatever wage you're on, you got the actual amount for that for a full day. Nowadays, you don't. The supply teacher agency gets a certain cut, and then you get a portion of that. So not what you should actually pay.
Can you flesh out for me? I was really struck by, well, several things you said, but the idea that ultimately it was like being on minimum wage. You had your wages, but then you had all the hours you were working.
Yeah.
What would have happened if you had done just the hours you were being paid for?
I wouldn't have, well, one, I wouldn't have got the target met for that I would have needed to progress myself. But mostly I would have delivered rubbish lessons. So I'm in teaching, I still am in teaching. Actually, I teach online now, but I deliver lessons that I think are going to engage children. I'm a primary school teacher. So if I just go to one of the websites where you can just print worksheets or something, that's really boring. And I wasn't in teaching for that. I was in teaching to try and make it fun and exciting and engage children and things like science. So they love doing the practicals and things like that. So it was a combination of everything. And also we wouldn't have had the displays up and parents' evening, things like that you don't get paid for, that you then, you just can't be in it if you're not putting in the hours.
But it didn't sound like a bit of overtime. It sounded like doing 2 jobs.
Yeah. Well, I averaged it out, and I worked 40 hours a week and was paid for it.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
I mean, as I said, I started over 20 years ago, and it certainly wasn't like that.
How is the online teaching now? How's that working for you?
Oh, lovely. Absolutely lovely. It's one-to-one, so it's tutoring. And I get the children over Zoom. It's all very safe. You can find lots of different online games to keep them engaged and things. For me personally, that works. It's not the same as being in a classroom of children, but actually it's a lot safer and it's lovely.
And,
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
Just from the basis of what you've told me,
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
a teacher full of ideas, and for you not to be in the profession in a classroom seems to me to be sad.
And I think unfortunately there's an awful lot of teachers like me that are very dedicated, that have just, I guess, seen the light and gone, I can't cope with this. Actually, my family needs to come first. And you can't have both. I was not reading my children a story at bedtime because I had so many books to mark. And that to me wasn't a good work-life balance. I might get the holidays, except you don't get the holidays because over Christmas you're still planning on what comes next. Actually, I feel very sorry for the poor teachers now, not knowing whether they're going into lockdown or online lessons and things. But you don't get those holidays, you don't get half term because you're planning for the next lot of lessons. The only time you do get time is in the summer holidays, but you're still in and out of school. So yes, you've got 6 weeks, but you've probably only got about 4 of them that are proper time off. Can I make one other comment as well?
Sure.
With Nazim Salari, on top of saying that it was an absolute priority to do everything to protect education, which I don't actually believe, because obviously he's a bit heavy filtered and things if it was. But the other thing is, there's an awful lot of Ofsted inspectors who like to come and tell teachers how to teach and obviously know how to teach. So I wonder if they could deploy them instead.
Oh, always a helpful suggestion from Jane. 0345 6060 973. Whatever your current relationship with the teaching profession, if you're still in it, I'd love to hear from you. But also, if you're one of the people that Nadim Zahawi is trying to appeal to, Are you thinking about it? I'll play you the clip again in a moment of exactly what he wants you to do, but it'd be good to hear from you. You can text 84850. Rosie's done that. I've taught for 28 years. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. We are ridiculed and teacher bashed by the media and despised by the Tory government. We weren't even prioritised for vaccinations. Schools never shut. Been on the front line in the line of fire since March 2020, and now they suddenly need us and want us. Insulted doesn't cover it. Teachers are leaving in droves for a reason. Desperate to get out, not desperate to return. Let me know your view. 0345 6060 973 at 6:30 on LBC. Amelia Cox with the headlines.
The Prime Minister has decided against making any immediate changes to coronavirus restrictions in England, but Boris Johnson says he won't rule out further measures in the future following a cabinet meeting this afternoon. A man who murdered one of the UK's wealthiest men has been jailed for at least 36 years. Thomas Schreiber killed Sir Richard Sutton and also attempted to murder his own mother, Anne Schreiber, in Dorset in April. And it's understood the Queen will celebrate Christmas at Windsor again this year rather than travel to Sandringham. Sources suggest family will visit Her Majesty with sensible precautions in place.
LBC Business Update.
With Direct Line Business Insurance. Cover for your business without breaking the bank.
The number of shoppers fell 2.6% during the final weekend before Christmas compared to the weekend before. Retail experts Springboard say footfall was higher in smaller market towns, shopping centres and retail parks, but down sharply in cities. LBC weather staying dry across the UK tonight. Some drizzle for the far north, a low of 1 degree.
LBC.
Why should you consider dental implants? Here's Susan Tanner from the Darwood and Tanner Dental Practice.
The secret to good-looking teeth on dental implants is in the science and our expertise acquired over many years. Our technology improves the ability to diagnose and provide solutions for even the most complex problems. The result looks and feels amazing.
See the success stories from happy patients and book your consultation today. Visit darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Every adult in the country now needs to get a COVID-19 booster vaccine because 2 doses do not give you enough protection against catching Omicron. Boosters give you the best possible protection against the virus and should significantly reduce your risk of serious illness and hospitalization. Strengthen your protection.
Keep right to stay on M4.
Now. Visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
Hold on to your mugs. EE's Full Fiber is here. New broadband that can handle anything. And whatever you think that means, times it by a zillion and dip it in chocolate. Because this broadband connects 100 devices in your home. Search EE Full Fiber.
18.3% UK availability. Check coverage at ee.co.uk.
It's Lidl's Christmas pick of the week. Get all your trimmings for just 19p. That's British carrots, Brussels sprouts, parsnips, red cabbage, roasting potatoes and shallots for just 19p. In Lidl stores now. Now that's big on quality and always little on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes NI.
It was just another day in another week for Jenny. But as she listened to the radio, she was suddenly filled with an urge to escape. So Jenny pressed the green button and flew to Ireland's wild Atlantic way. She met the friendly locals of Cork's famous English market, indulged in the delicious fresh seafood of Galway, and explored the dramatic coastlines and picturesque landscapes of Donegal. Press the green button and fly to Ireland's wild Atlantic way this winter. Just over an hour from London's Stansted Airport.
This is LBC with Eddie Mayer. Call 0345 6060 973.
Here's England's Education Secretary Nadim Zahawi.
It's been my absolute priority since day one in the role of doing everything in my power to protect education. That involves a number of things, but very importantly, it means making sure that schools and colleges have the teaching staff they need to safely deliver face-to-face education. Now, although 99.9% of schools have consistently been open this term, we can all see the tidal wave of Omicron coming our way. That is why today I'm asking any teacher no longer in the profession to come forward if they are available to temporarily fill absences in schools and colleges in the new year. Anyone who thinks they can help should go to the Get Into Teaching website to retired or trained as a teacher and have moved profession, I urge you to consider whether you might be able to...
In a quarter of a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
...supply staff available around the country. There's full guidance up on the website on how we manage issues like DBS checks. Don't let anything get in the way of coming forward to join the national mission to protect education.
You're a former teacher?
Keep right to stay on M4.
As he puts it. And if you're still in the profession, what do you think? 0345 6060973. Danny.
Continue on M4 for 4 miles.
Teacher. I think these teachers you have on are over-egging it here. These teachers on your show need to learn how to say no, like in all professions. Most teachers are happy with the risks in schools. We're happier there than back to online teaching. Nora is in Liverpool. Nora, welcome.
Hi. I've just listened to that clip again, and it sounds very much as though he's expecting people to volunteer, doesn't it? Nothing. I'm trying to get to the bottom of how much they're offering, because supply teachers want the best money in the world, and you do call the supervisor, it doesn't even reach minimum wage. So I just wonder whether he's expecting people to just come forward out of the goodness of their hearts.
Well, he called it a national mission, didn't he? Maybe that is what he's hoping for.
There's no mention at all of remuneration, was there?
What's your position, Nora? What's your situation?
Well, as a supply teacher, I've done supply teaching for years since I qualified in 1994 practically. Up to the day when they closed the schools for COVID. On that day, I had a class. I had my class, but there was reduced numbers because even by that point, pupils had stopped coming in. So the head of department took a decision. She said, well, the rest of the department need to prepare because of the closing the school. So we'll put all the classes that are left with you, and then we'll just carry on the afternoon doing preparations. So that's good, except that there wasn't enough chairs in the classroom for so many kids. And then one of them arrived with a roaring temperature, and another one with uncontrollable coughing. So I asked those to go into the corridors and learning area outside the classroom. I was told, well, you can't do that, you have to have them in the classroom because we have a no corridor policy. So I just felt very much at risk, really, very vulnerable. And since that point, I haven't gone back. I did test and trace. I've just filled in with doing other jobs in the meantime. And so I'm just waiting now until things get better. So I will go back, but I think I'll do an assessment of the schools I get sent to and see, well, one, I get paid, and two, that they're taking the adequate precautions.
Nora, good to hear from you. 0345 6060973 if you're a former member of the teaching profession or you're still there. You heard Nadim Zahawi wants very much to get as many former teachers back into the supply game as possible. Are you interested? 0345 6060973. I'm a 68-year-old retired teacher, says Paul. The Education Secretary requests former teachers to volunteer to return. It's presumably on a voluntary basis. To help attempt to remedy the neglect and vindictive handicap on life chances they've inflicted on a generation of young people who deserve some...
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
In Haringey. Why don't they offer teachers a round of applause? That should have them flocking in. Mike is in Dudley. Mike, what do you say? Welcome.
Hi, Eddie. Yeah, well, I do think that the teachers who've left the profession have probably left for a reason. Whether that be, overweight or underpaid or, the usual things that we talk about, but they're real things. You go through all these years, you get your degree, you teach your training and stuff like that, and then the pay is nowhere near to what you get to in the private sector for similar, for a similar level of qualification.
Do you teach now, Mike?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Tell me about that. What sort of place do you teach in?
I teach in a college in the inner city area. And yeah, I mean, the kids are great, but they do come from challenging backgrounds. And so it's like, what other jobs do you get that you have a room full of 24 people? Many of them trying to stop you from doing your day job, for that's the nature of kids in schools and colleges, really. But it's really rewarding work. It's really rewarding work, but you can get burnt out very easily. So, so the request for getting people to come back into teaching, I think it's a bit difficult because you'll do your stint, and a lot of people will do the stint and they'll leave because they're burnt out.
What's the attraction for you? Have you always been a teacher?
No, I was in industry for many years, and one day I was sitting
in a quarter of a mile at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Earnings before, basically more profit, and I thought to myself, well, I'd rather do something that I'm actually making a difference for people's lives rather than for shareholders' wallets. So that's why I left my work and I went back to uni full time.
Exit at junction 6.
And here I am now, teaching.
It's quite a change.
Yeah, massive change, both financially and...
in a quarter of a mile at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Tuns Lane, A355.
I do love the job. It's a very rewarding job teaching, in the fact that, you get to... I think you get the rewards at the end of the year when the kids leave and they go off to universities and they go off and do this and that, and you get you'll get someone who's just come up to you and just thank you for things that you think, I didn't even think anyone noticed that particular thing, but they'll thank you for it and say, it makes it all worthwhile.
Do you never, on bad days, sit there and think back to your days in industry and think, I wish I was worried about making profits again?
So, do you know what, it's funny actually, I had a slight sort of break in teaching midway through. About 4 years ago, I went and did a bit of work for the Department for Education. It was subcontracted for a charity, doing some work on T-levels. And I was managing a team, and my first day...
Exit the roundabout onto Tuns Lane.
Overwhelming sense of desolation because it didn't seem to matter. Because I wasn't
in a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
So yes, but I always think back to that day and think, you know what, no matter how tough it is, what you're doing, it matters. It makes a difference.
And do you feel valued by your bosses? Because I always think that's very important. If you don't feel valued by your bosses, then that's, you don't want to stay.
It's the problem with education, Eddie, is targets. It's all about targets and Ofsted reports and stuff like that. So being valued as an individual teacher by bosses, not particularly now. I think you're more valued in private...
Slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
By bosses. Very much seen in teaching as a commodity, I think. A scarce commodity now.
Yes. You're in demand. Time to ask for that pay rise.
But I mean, that, in a few months that'll change and we'll go back to, these are your targets, the panic's over. Pay rise? No, you just carry on with what you're doing. Even though we've had this announcement, I do think we're still...
Continue for 1.5 miles.
Good to hear from you, thank you. Interesting journey you've been on, if I can use that word in that context. Eddie, I've only just got in, so don't know what may have already been said, says Sally. Sally, I've been here the whole time and I'm not sure. But why on earth don't they take final year teaching students? They've already spent weeks in schools teaching. They're young, healthy and keen. They have the skills and want to join the profession. God help them, says Sally. This government come up with some ideas, but this idea of using volunteer retired teachers to plug the gaps absolutely takes the biscuit. Well, let's ask Lord Blunkett, who is David Blunkett, was Education Secretary between 1997 and 2001. He was Home Secretary too. He's now a Labour peer. Welcome to LBC, Lord Blunkett. What do you think of Nadim Zahawi's initiative here?
Well, it sounds like desperation, but if we're in desperation in January, I'd rather use whatever measures he can come up with rather than close schools. I mean, we are in a place of deep confusion. We've got head teachers and teachers going quite rightly on Christmas break, like all those who are not on emergency services, and deserve it. And they need to know well in advance of coming back in January exactly what needs to be done. Bear in mind that we are coming back to schools very early in January this year, so we can't mess about like we did last year.
The correspondence we've had from listeners so far, we've had teachers saying, this is all very well, but I'm worried about safety, I'm worried about masks, I'm worried about lack of ventilation in classroom. What do you say to those concerns, which several people have told me is why some people have left the profession?
Well, I get that. I understand why people are anxious. I mean, the daily dose of anxiety that is being perpetrated at the moment, every 2 or 3 days this virus is going to double. It doesn't, but people believe it is or will. Today I even heard a scientist talking about 600 deaths a day. So no wonder people are in meltdown. I think a great, I don't say a deep breath, do I, at the moment? A moment of reflection, of just looking at the figures, of actually reflecting on the fact that some of us really did and still do believe in the vaccine. And those who are triple vaccinated, those who are taking sensible, careful measures, should not be more worried to go into a classroom than they are to go into the supermarket to buy their Christmas vegetables or to pick up their turkey. And for those who are on running public transport, those who are in retail, those who can't escape going to work, I think hearing other people saying that they're worried about going back in January, now let me put it as bluntly as I usually do, it's a bit rich.
Lord Blunkett, thank you. The news headlines, here's Amelia Cox.
Boris Johnson says he won't rule out anything in the future, but isn't making any immediate changes to COVID rules in England. Labour says there are serious questions to answer following a leaked photo of a gathering in the garden at number 10 in May last year. And it's understood the Queen will spend Christmas at Windsor again this year, rather than making her traditional trip to Sandringham. LBC weather staying dry across the UK tonight, some drizzle for the far north, a low of 1 degree.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff. There are delays on the M25 anti-clockwise. 3 out of the 4 lanes are closed at junction 11 for Chertsey because of an accident, so there are queues from junction 13 for Staines. It's also very slow on the M25 clockwise at junction 11 for Chertsey as people look across. It's very slow in Aldgate on the A11 Whitechapel Road going into town after a lorry broke down earlier on at Whitechurch Lane. In Walthamstow, there are queues on the North Circular Road eastbound to the Crooked Billet interchange after a car broke down earlier. On the Underground, there are severe delays on the Victoria line. That's because of a water leak at Oxford Circus. And on the trains, greater angle
in a quarter of a mile, turn left onto Buckingham Avenue.
Airport. That's because of an investigation.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
The Cabinet took a decision this afternoon to